And now a little story from the Appleseed.
When I was a little boy, and even when my brother who's almost 3 years younger, when he was little, we never really had a babysitter because our mother was with us all the time. And if our mother wasn't with us, we were probably at our grandmother's house. But when I got to the second grade and my little brother Joe was old enough to go to kindergarten, my mother, who had not taught school from the time I was born till we both went to school, she was going to go back to teaching again. And so once in a while, we needed a babysitter. Well, up the road from where we lived, there lived this little old lady named Miss Annie McIntosh. And Miss Annie became our once in a while babysitter. She was old. I mean, she could have been 50. She was probably, though, closer to 80. And she had this little old 39 Chevy that she drove. And sometimes she'd come to our house, and sometimes we'd go to her house. And we loved it when we would go to her house because since she was an old lady, she took naps. And when she took naps, we could prowl all over her house. It had an attic, it had upstairs, it had downstairs, it had a basement. We could just go everywhere, and we just loved it. But we began to get older. And as we began to get older, we got to that age where we didn't want to have a babysitter anymore. And we tried to explain that to our mother and daddy, but our mother was not very smart. And she just kept calling the babysitter. Well, one of the things we loved about going up to Miss Annie's house was, beside her house, she had a little garage apartment. And there was a man who lived there who was a policeman. He was actually the assistant police chief. His name was Robert Louis Fitzgerald. He was not married, and he would drive a police car home. And when we go to her house, he let us play in the police car. He would show us how to mash a button that would go, wow, 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 wow. We could play with these, spotlights on either side of the car, and he would fix a microphone so we could talk, and our voice would come out through the front of the car, and we could turn the light on top, and it was great fun playing with the policeman in the police car. He was fairly young, and he didn't have any kids, so he liked playing with us too. Well, we got to that age. And we started telling our mother, we're too old for a babysitter. We don't need a babysitter anymore. And our mother just kept saying, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so. And we kept having to put up with having a babysitter. Well, one day my mother said, now, boys, tonight, your daddy and I are going over to the Nesbitt's house. We're going to have supper, and they're going to have some more friends there, and we're going to be there for a little while. And we've called Miss Annie to come and be your babysitter while we're gone. Well, my little brother said, we don't need her. Now, my little brother was a little bit like my Uncle Frank in that he also was born without a lid to go on his mouth. And sometimes my mother would just let my little brother's mouth run to see what was going to come out of it. And so instead of arguing with him, she said, what do you mean by that? He said, she's too old to be a babysitter. My mother said, really? My brother said, she can't make us do anything. If we do what she says, it's because we want to, not because we're scared of her. And my mother said, really? And my brother said, yes, really. She is so old that nothing on her even works but her mouth. And I can outrun her. And my mother just laughed and said, well, we'll see about that. Well, we had our supper early, and then in a little while, here came Miss Annie. She was coming down to our house to stay with us. She came in her little Chevy, and she parked in front of the house, and she came inside, and she talked a little bit with my mom and daddy, and they left. And she said, well, boys, you've had your supper. Would you like to hear a nice story? Do you want me to read to you before you go to bed? And my little brother said, stories are stupid. We're too old for stories. We can read for ourselves. You don't need to read to us. She said, well then, what do you boys want to do? Because it's not quite time to go to bed. And we said, we want to watch television because we had our first ever brand new television. We got only one channel. Channel 13 in Asheville, North Carolina, so we didn't spend a lot of time finding out there was nothing to watch. So we went over and we turned on the television, and do you know there was a special program about the circus? And we started watching that show about the circus, and it was just wonderful. They came out and they would swing on the trapeze and fly through the air and catch each other and fly through the air. And my little brother looked up and he said, I wish I could do that. And then they came out and they walked on the tight wire, back and forth, keeping balance and balance. And my little brother said, oh, I wish I could do that. And then a man came out on a little kind of motorbike and he got inside a big ball that looked like it was made out of wire. And he rode around and around inside the ball. And my brother almost cried. He said, oh, I wish I could do that. And then acrobats came running out and they just were flipping through the air and flipping through the air and flipping through the air and flipping through the air. And all of a sudden my brother just said, we can do that. And we started playing circus while we watched the program right then. They would flip through the air and we would flip through the air, and they would run and jump and we would run and jump. And pretty soon we had all the cushions from all the furniture in the living room and the floor. And we were going down the hall, and we would run down the hall and jump in the air and land on a cushion and flip over and land on the other side. And then we would watch a little bit more, the acrobats, to get more ideas so we could do even more. And all of a sudden, here came my little brother running down the hall. He had taken off his shoes and socks so he wouldn't slip on the floor. And he took a great leap in the air, and he landed on the cushion on his hands with his feet up in the air, and the cushion slipped. And he fell over sideways, and he hit the table, and he knocked my mother's brand new 4.5 book S&H green stamps lamp off of that table. And it went bam against the wall, and it hit the floor, and the light went out, but it didn't break. And Miss Annie said, well, boys, that's enough circus. It is now time to go to bed. And my little brother looked at her and he went and took off running toward the other end of the house. She did not go after him. She just reached down and picked up her pocketbook, hung it over her arm, walked out the door of our house, got in her car, and left. And my brother and I danced around. We won, we won. We got rid of a babysitter. We won, we won. And we proceeded to totally turn the house into the absolute circus. We would turn chairs upside down and run up the back of the chair and flip off the other side. We got on top of the dining room table and we pretended that crack, where you could pull it over, that was the tight wire. And we were walking back and forth on the crack on the table. And my little brother got hold of the curtains and he said, I'm going to swing across the room. And right then, there was a knock at the door. And my brother Joe ran to the door, and I went over and looked out the window. And when I looked out the window, there parked in front of our house was a police car with the light going around on the top. And my little brother opened the door, and there stood Robert Louis Fitzgerald with his gun out. And we said, what do you want? And he said, where are your parents? We said, what are you here for? What do you want? He said, well, we just had a report that somebody is wrecking the Davises' house. Where are your parents? I said, what do you need them for? He said, well, so I can put them in jail for leaving children at home without anybody to watch them. By then, he was in our house, looking around. He said, I've never seen a place torn up like this place. Where are your parents? He said, look, I've got 2 pairs of handcuffs, one for each one of them. They're going to have to go to jail for this. And my little brother says, don't put my mom in jail. She doesn't know what to do in jail. I don't know about my daddy. He said, well, they left you without a babysitter. That's what I got to do. Unless you boys got another idea. My little brother said, well, I really like it when Miss Annie McIntosh gets to be my babysitter. He said, well, let me call her and see if she might be able to come. And he picked up our telephone. By the time he finished that call, we had the house fixed back better than it was to start with. And as he drove away, here she came back in her little Chevy. She came in the door and she said, well, boys, you want to watch some more television? My brother said, no, it's no good. What we'd like is a story. And then I said, is it okay to go to bed now? Because we got real tired. And we both got in our beds, and she came in our room and sat between us, and she read us a story. I have no idea what that story was about, because I was just sitting there trying to imagine my mother in handcuffs. Well, finally our parents came home, and I knew there were going to be a lot of questions, and so I thought, I'm just going to let my little brother handle these questions, because he likes for his mouth to run. My mother said, well, boys, how'd you get along? He said, just fine. She said, did you watch television, the new television? Did you watch a program? He said, not much. It wasn't any good. Miss Annie read us a story. We asked her to read us a story. We like stories. It was a real good story. My mother said, oh, well, what was it about? I had no idea. My brother said, it was about these 2 little boys. They almost got in trouble, but not quite. Well, that old lady was our babysitter till we were both graduated from high school. But the important thing I got to learn way early in life, when some people don't learn it till it's almost too late, and that is this. If you were messing with an old lady, it doesn't matter if nothing on her works but her mouth. You are going to lose.
Thanks for joining us for a little story from the Appleseed.